Today we're going to work on our student survey. We're going to look at the data just as a practice. You really need to practice. We only have 620 responses so far, 150 more to go. So we're just going to practice with this data and see what we get. I recommend that when we look at these responses, you just follow these directions and work right along with me. We've got two parts: cleaning data, making a regression, and then analyzing using pivot tables. So let's start looking at the original data. So the original data is enormous, as you can see. It goes on for a very long time in both directions, all right? So it's too much for us to work on. So what we're going to do is isolate the things that you're really interested in. So I'm going to just randomly pick 3 things for us to look at, or actually 4. We're going to look at these 4 items, and I think there might be a relationship between how often students pull out their phone and stress level, and I want to look at that by gender and race. So what I'm going to do is delete everything else. So I don't need timetables, timestamps. I'm going to delete that. How many times you pull out your phone, that's the thing I want. I don't need these other ones, so I'm going to delete these. You go ahead and do that until you're left with just these 4 things. All right, I now just have 4 things, so now what I want to do is just do a little formatting so it looks better. So one thing I'm going to do is expand that out so you can see the full thing. I want all of these to be about the same height. So I notice I highlight everything, and then I make it all about here. All right. That means number 1 is way too short, but these guys, actually let me get them all around the white height I want. Now make number 1 the height I want that to be. I'm going to change my formatting here with my cell style. Then I'm also going to change the wording. So I want to change the wording on these because I think it's just too wordy for me to really capture what's going on. So I'm just going to change this to pulling out phone. And I'll change these other 3 as well. All right, now the formatting looks a little bit better. So now what I need to do is actually clean the data. And to do that, I need to put a filter on. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight all of this data and put a filter on it. So as you can see how my data is highlighted, I go over here to sort and filter, and I put that filter on, and now I can filter everything. So let's start with pulling out the phone. So what I need to watch for is words or weird phrases. I need this all to be quantitative data. So what I can do is if I load down this filter, I can immediately see, if I look down here, that I've got some stuff that looks a little funny. So what I'm going to do is a quick way to look at that, actually, rather than just unclicking it, is just to go smallest to largest. Now here it's not showing. So now I'm going to sort it again, largest to smallest, and now I can see all of these weird things that I need to change. A lot would just have to be a space. I do not know what a lot is. I do not know what a lot is. I don't know what 5 plus is. 3 times, that I can just turn into 3. 0 to 1, when I have between 2 numbers, I take an average, so I'll make that a 0.5. Here on a date, I actually know what happened. It was probably 4 to 5. They turned that into April 5th. So 4 to 5 would be 4.5. But watch what happens when I type it in. 4.5. Looks good, right? Hit enter, and now it's turned back into a date. So I need to go back up here. I need to go over to number, and I need to turn that into a number, and now it turns into what I want. 3 to 5, that's actually 4. 2 to 3, that's February, that's a 2 and a 3. That would be a 2.5. 2 to 3 again, oops, I typed that wrong. 2.5 down, 2.5 down, and now we're looking okay, except I do need to turn these into actual numbers. And that one still also needs to be turned into a number. All right, so I've cleaned up pulling out phone. Now let's go look at stress level. Stress level, here it shows me all the different type of data points I have. These look normal. This, however, looks a little weird. So what I'm going to do is only a couple of them. So I'm going to select all. That turns everything off. And then I'm only going to choose these 3 weird ones. Okay, so now that's the only one that's showing. June 7th. So that would be, I'm guessing again, that date. June is 6, 6 to 7, so that really should be a 6.5. Of course, that turns into a weird date again, so I need to go ahead and turn that into a number. All right, to unfilter all these, when I'm done, I hit select all, and all right, so with gender, we've got a much more complicated issue because we have different identities here. We don't just have misinformation. So we're going to be looking at 2 issues here. One thing we're going to be looking at is kind of erroneous data, questionable data, and the other thing we're going to be looking at is small sample size. All right, so if we look here, we have things like non-binary, third gender, agender. Those are going to be issues of small sample size, but then we have things like horse, IDK, and chair. Those might be more of our kind of erroneous, silly data that we don't really want to have a part of our data set. So what I will do first is just look at the things that have super small sample size and also erroneous data. So to do this, what I'll do is I just keep going to that filter again, and it's easier just to kind of deselect everything here. So I've got all these things marked. If I unselect all of them, and then I just click on the ones that I want to focus on. Okay, so I'm going to click on these couple things that I want to look at, which I just happen to know ahead of time. I have crazy small sample size. Okay, so I'm going to look at a gender, chair, horse. Okay, I don't mean to be offensive of anyone. These are just things that students actually put down. So I don't mean to mix misinformation with just small sample size. But we have here a gender. We only have one person who put that. Definitely do not want one person representing an entire population. So I'm going to put a space here. I'm going to take that out and just leave that blank. These other ones is just not good data. So I'm taking those out as well. All right. Okay, so now I have all of those there, but now I've got these other ones still. Okay, I'm going to select those again. And now I just need to make sure that the sample sizes aren't too small on some of these. So my big concern here is the non-binary, third gender, and trans. I think that that's going to be under 30, which to me is too small to really be representing a population. It's too much of a kind of individual data. And when I look at that, it is under 30. So I personally am going to make the call to just put in spaces, leave these as blank, and not summarize their data. You, however, if you want to, if you feel that you still want to put it in there and then just make a note of the sample size so whoever's looking at your results can realize that this is representing a very, very small group, you can do that, and you can combine it. But for me, for now, I feel like it's too small, so I'm just going to put in blanks for these. And I'm just going to put them as just blanks because that's all I can do with these. I don't want to try to analyze such a small group that I'm not very certain about. All right, now I can select all again. Okay. So now we are back. With race, the same thing. This is going to be a lot more complicated here. So what I want to focus on is we have all these options for mixed race. Now my concern with that is that they're going to be too small of groups for me to really analyze. So I would like the groups to be, you know, like 30 or more. So I'm going to get rid of the single race ones that we have. Okay, Latino, Hispanic, Asian, Pacific Islander, African American, white, and Native American. And I won't look at blanks right now. And let's just look at what we have here. Now, when you first look at this, it looks like I didn't actually get the mixed groups. It just says white, but I want you to realize the reason that is because it just didn't show everything that was there. So these are all the different groups. Now, looking at each group, they're pretty small. Let's actually sort them from A to Z so we can get them in groups. So Latino and white has only got 4. This group and white a little bit bigger, but I would still say less than 30. Asian Latino only 4. Found above. Not found above, we're going to probably have to put spaces for those. American probably needs a space. We don't have a definite definition for this. Latino and white, less than 1. So the issue we have is that all of these are pretty small groups, except for perhaps Asian and white. So what we're going to have to do is for a lot of these, we're going to have to either just put mixed or give a blank depending on which one they are. So we're going to just kind of go through these, and if it's clearly mixed, I'll give it mixed. If I can't really identify what it is, then I will give it just a blank. This is much more complicated because African and white is pretty big, so I want to see if that's a big enough group to keep it as itself. So we're going to say if it's 30 or more, we'll keep it. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to do a count if statement. So just on the side, I'm going to do equals count if, all right? And then I'm going to open that up. And the range is going to be from here, Control Shift all the way down. And the criteria, now for the criteria, probably the easiest way to get this criteria is to actually click on that so we actually know what that is, that term. We don't write it, and say okay, and now we end up with 22. So 22, I'm kind of giving the number 30. That's kind of small. The other group that I'm really concerned about, if that's big enough, is the Asian and white group. So this time I'm going to do that count if again, but I'm going to do Asian and white. So I'm just going to copy and paste that. I'm going to actually go right back up to that same exact equation, hit FX, and this time I already have everything highlighted, but instead of that criteria of African American white, I'm just going to paste in the mixed Asian and white and see what that count is. That count is 35. So I'm going to leave the mixed Asian and white as its own group. All right, it's the only one. Every other groups we're going to just put as mixed. All right, so we'll just go down and do that. So now I've cleaned up the data for race, so it's mainly mixed here, and then I'm leaving that mixed Asian and white. And what I'm also going to do is then select everything so I can see it all and hit OK. The next step is to actually do a regression line. We want to see if stress level causes people to pull out their phone more. That's kind of what my hypothesis is. So I need to run a regression line. The way I'm going to do that, the problem is this is my X and this is my Y. So if you just highlight it, it's going to be in the wrong order. So I'm going to go to Insert. I'm going to hit a chart, and I'm just going to hit that. I just have a blank here, or it's not quite blank. And then what I'm going to do is select the data. All right, so whatever there I'm going to remove, and then I'm going to add, and now I can put in my title, highlight my X values, highlight my Y values, and it will all work out. So I've done all that. I'm just going to check and make sure these numbers match, because they do have to start and end the same, both at 2 here, both at 621. Okay. Okay, and now here is my graph. I just need to now add in a trend line. To add a trend line, we just go over to these elements. You're going to do more trending options, and you're going to put in that trend line as well as an equation. All right, and for the trend line, make sure that it is nice and thick. You want to actually have a thick line and have that be a different color than your data so it really sticks out. When you're done, you should have the equation clear to see with the r squared, which in this case is incredibly low. We have a very low r squared. We have some points that are possible outliers. I'm not quite sure. We still need to look at the residual plot. I've labeled my axes, and what I'm going to do with this graph is I'm going to actually put it on either a Google Doc or a regular Word document. So I just highlight it so I can see the little circles all around it. I copy it, I go over to my Google Doc, and I paste it on, and now I can see the results right here. So based on these initial results, as I said, we still have more data to look at. I would say that stress level has very minimal impact on how many times someone pulls out the phone. But there's still more that I can look at. So I'm going to take a much closer look at this data, and I'm going to look at it by gender and race. So now I'm going to start looking at pivot tables. We're going to move on to part 2. To make a pivot table, I'm going to need to highlight all of my data and insert a pivot table. All my data is highlighted. I go to Insert, Pivot Table. I want to make sure it goes onto a new worksheet. Okay. And now it's there. You can see the values. The first thing I want to look at is stress value and gender. So this is kind of weird when it shows it all like this. So I'm going to put it over into values. All right. The thing about stress value, though, this is just counting the number of entries, and I don't want a count. So what I'm going to do is go to value field settings, and I think it'd be much more meaningful to me to know the average stress value. Okay. So now I know the average for all students. All right. But I want to actually break it down by gender. So you see I click that, it goes right into rows, and I can see all of these genders. The other thing I would like to do is I'd like to see it from smallest to largest. That gives me a better idea of what's going on. So I'm just going to sort it from smallest to largest, and now it's right here. These numbers are also hard to look at, so I'm going to highlight those numbers, and I'm going to kind of shrink them back so I only have just one decimal out. So now very quickly, without much work, I can look at the average stress value for males, females, for other, and for blanks. Now this is kind of a little weird, so I'm going to change that. I want to take a close look at it, so I'm going to highlight all this data right here, this weird data, and I'm going to actually go ahead to analyze, and I'm going to put in a pivot chart. I'm going to make a table out of this, so the table looks good. Okay, great. Now I have a table. Now I have these categories that are a little off. Other, I'm a little concerned about because it's under 30, so it's a pretty small group, so I'm not sure if I'm going to use that. So what I'm going to do is come over here, and I'm going to click on, I just, for now, want to just focus not on the empties. I'm not going to focus on the other because I'm worried it's too small of a sample side. Of course, not on the blanks. Okay, and now I just can see the males and females. The other thing I'd like to always see is the value up here. So I'm going to have this clicked on. I'm going to go to Design, Chart Elements, and I'm going to add Data Label so I can actually see the quantity outside. So we can see that females actually have a higher stress level on average than males. I then need to change the title. If I just click in here and then click up here, I can actually type in the title and hit return, and it will end up right there. All right, these results look interesting. I'm just going to get rid of that total. I don't need this. So now I have a graph that shows me some interesting things I might want to talk about later. So I'm going to save that graph. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to head on over to that one document, and I'm going to actually paste it here as well. So now I have the results right on this Word document for me to look at later, because as I keep playing with my pivot table, this is going to disappear. The next thing I want to actually look at is I want to see stress levels by race. Actually, I'm curious if there's a difference for different races. So I'm going to pull the gender out of there, and I'm going to bring race in. All right, now this shows a lot. It's hard for me to see everything going on. First thing to make it easier would, of course, just be to change these numbers. So now these are easier to see. The other thing that's always nice to see is to see them in order. So you can just click on anything here, right click, go to sort. I'm going to again sort it from smallest to largest so I can see how it's growing. Now it's kind of small. It's sort of hard to really see, and I don't know if I want everything there. So let's look at what we really want to look at. I'm not interested in blanks. Okay, and there's another blank right there. Okay, that cleans it up a little bit more. Now I've got these different groups here. It's still a little hard to see. What might make it easier, I don't know if you remember doing this, but I can double click right here and I can actually change the minimum. It looks like everything is far above 6.2 or even higher than that, so I could even go to the minimum of 6.4, and now I can start to really see the difference. Notice how I still have my data labels up here. Notice I did change the title to by race. It's kind of interesting to look at. You can see the race that seems to have the highest stress level, the lowest stress level. I'm going to go ahead and copy that and also move this onto our Word document. All right, next now for this podcast, it'd be probably good to know a little bit about the Racial Breakdown Act grant. So I'm going to actually use our data to do that. So I'm going to delete this out here. All right, we don't need that anymore. And I'm going to get rid of all of this, and now I'm going to actually put race in two places. It's kind of interesting. I'm going to put it under the count values and race. So now I have counts for all the different races as well as the race right here. So I'm going to make a table of that, and I think the table that would actually make the most sense, I go to Analyze and Pivot Chart, is not a bar graph but actually a pie chart. So I'm going to put a pie chart in here. All right, and I'm going to change it up just a little bit so it can look how I like. So I'm going to go to Design, maybe Quick Layout. I like to have percents and names right there. That looks good. And maybe make it bigger so I can see it a little bit better. All right, and then give it a new title. So now I have a title on this. An interesting thing is I actually went online to do a little research to see what the racial breakdown is, to see how close, at least so far, our survey is. And kind of interesting, here's what it looks like so far. And you can see at least on white, it's 65%, and we're at 68. So we're not too far off the actual count here. You're going to copy and paste this onto your other Word document as well. I'm going to go ahead and delete this because the last thing I want to look at is a little more complex. What I want to actually look at is the relationship between race and gender. So you can see they're both right in here. And I actually want to look at that and pulling out phones. So how is it between males and females of different genders that they pull out the phone? So this looks pretty complicated, so let's try to clean it up a little bit. Let's just start by looking at just gender and pulling out the phone. All right. Now this is how many counts of each pulling out the phone. I want to know on average how much they do. So again, I always have to go to my value setting. I want to know on average how much each person does. Okay, so now I can see just overall for males and females. Again, that's hard to look at, so I'm going to just shrink that down. But I want to know by race, not just male and females in general. So to do this, I'm going to actually do something called putting a slicer in. All right, so I'm going to go to Analyze, and I'm going to go ahead and click on Insert a Slicer. And the slice I want to insert is race. Okay, so now what this allows me to do is look at it just by, say, African American. So when I look at African Americans, I can see that males actually have a much higher average than females. For Asian Pacific Islanders, females have a higher average than males. Latinos, you can see the mixed, very similar. Native Americans, we actually only have data on Native American females. And for whites, also very similar. So this is kind of interesting just to kind of look and see. So we have our biggest discrepancy with African Americans in use by gender. So I want to maybe summarize all of that. So how I'm going to do that now is I'm going to actually click on that. That removes the filter. And I'm just going to delete out my slicer now that I've kind of taken a closer look at it. And I'm going to try to actually include this into here. So it's there right now. And I would like to actually have it broken down by race and then by gender. So what I do, see how it's gender, you can see male, female in each race. I want to actually see for each race, I want to compare the female, male. So notice I moved the race above gender. Now I have each one and then their counts. Now it's a little complicated to look at. It might be easier to look at as a graph. So let's go ahead and highlight this data. All right, sorry. You don't want to include the titles when you highlight your data. And then again, Analyze. We're going to insert a chart. For this one, maybe a chart is best. Okay. And let's take a look at it. It's pretty hard to really see what's going on. I'm going to, on race, I'm going to look at the ones I don't want blanks. So I'm going to get that out of there. It might clean it up a little bit there. It does. And get rid of that total there. I don't need that. Change the title. So on this graph, I do want to put labels in there. So I go to Design just so that I can actually have the real data available to me. So I always want to put that up above so people can look at the real numbers. This is a lot of information though, and there's a way visually I could try to make it easier to see. So what I'm going to actually do is click on each one. If I double click, I just get one, and I am going to fill it. And I'm going to do this one with yellow. And what I'm going to do is have each group be a different color. So then it'll be easier to kind of differentiate the groups. Now by having each group of different colors, it's a little easier to differentiate and see what's going on, and you can see where you have your really large discrepancy in the groups that have very similar behavior across males and females. You're going to copy and paste this as well onto your group of graphs that you have put together so far. The very last thing I want to look at is just simply average use of cell phone and gender, because I'm kind of curious about this. I'm noticing a big difference, not huge, but definitely it seems that females use their phone a lot less than males. So I want to kind of take a closer look. I'm going to put that into a graph, all right? And the thing I want to look at on this graph to make it a little bit more interesting, let me just get rid of this and change my title. So the thing I find interesting is they look really far apart. It looks like there's a big difference in males and females. So, but as someone who's taken stats now, I realize there's more to this. So I want to check the standard deviation, because I know if the standard deviation is really small, this means this is accurate. But if it gets bigger, it's not. So I'm going to go to Chart Elements and Error Bars. And then right down here is the standard deviation. And I'm going to actually put that standard deviation in. And this is when it looks interesting. If you notice, standard deviation shows you the range of where most of your data is. And it's pretty interesting to see that actually, though the average can be low, which means that there's probably a few extreme values that are very low, these two are really similar. Look, most of the values for males and females actually fall in the same range. So if I'm reporting this, I'm going to really take note of that. The average is not really good information here. When I look at that spread, they actually are very similar in their behavior. I'm going to copy and paste this as well. So I now have a bunch of results that I can really analyze and start writing about and thinking about for making my podcast. And I've put it all together, Lab 13. You should have all of these different graphs. And this is actually what you're going to submit for your lab. And then next time we meet, we'll be ready to work with the real complete data set and the actual questions you're the most interested in.